Start. Thank you. Right, lovely. So over to you, Matthew. 45, 50 minutes. The floor's all yours, young man.
Thank you, Michael John. Thank you, Chanel. My name is Matthew Mitchell. I have alcoholism. It's great to be here. It's really a privilege. I love that line in the doctor's opinion when he says the man asked for the privilege of sharing his story. I owe so much to Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date's May 16th, 1993. I wanted to do a nod to Gordon. I met Gordon through this meeting, and he was one of those enthusiastic AA people that put people together and carry the message across the water. And I have a poker game I play every year with the guys I went to first grade with. I'm 62 years old. We meet every year because one of our friends died when he was very young. He was 20. And he asked us to do this, and it never ceases to impress upon me. He had the shortest life and he had the biggest impact because we meet every year because of him, and he didn't live very long. And I'm still friends with those guys because of him. And I think Gordon has that kind of legacy because of this group. So really honored to be able to share this meeting where we remembered him. I have a really small topic. I appreciate that. I'll try to stretch it to 50 minutes. A journey through the 12 steps. Really, you guys? If you got like 4 hours, because I like these steps. I actually worked every one of them. I still do every day. And I have a few things to say. But I wanted to speak directly to Marilyn. I'm not sure, and Paul, who's back, Craig and Benjamin, I think you guys are new to the meeting. I'm not sure you're newcomers. You're just Americans like me and need to have yourselves recognized. I appreciate that. We're attention seekers, we Americans. But I love being in AA. And my first step, I'm going to just talk about the steps, okay? May 8th, 1993, my brother called me and said, tomorrow is Mother's Day. It might be our mom's last because my mom was sick. I'd been drinking all day, but I was going to clean up my act and get a nice card and do some laundry but I didn't. I drank all night, and my brother picked me up in the morning, and I ruined Mother's Day. Nobody had seen me for a long time. I weighed 108 pounds. I drank myself out of the best job I ever had. I was a rock and roll lead guitar player in a touring and recording band. Then I drank myself out of a bunch of lame jobs that anyone could do with their eyes closed, but I couldn't do. And I was just thinking the other day, I was sitting in that apartment in May. I'd lost money. I'd lost all the love, connected relationships I had. I'd lost my standing. I'd lost opportunity. But I think the thing I lost the most before I got sober that really became the most valuable, and I didn't know it, was my self-respect and my dignity and my character. I also had the opportunity to watch my grandson Emmett sleeping a few months ago. He's 2 years old. I was looking at him sleeping and how just peacefully he slept. And I thought, I lost that too. He has the innocence of safety on the inside of him. He's purely innocent, so he can just fall right to sleep because the world's waiting for him. And I lost that. I lost my innocence, my self-respect, my character, and my integrity. But I thought I'd lost things and people and opportunities. And on that day, May 9th, when I ruined Mother's Day, I was so belligerently drunk and such a jerk. And I love my mother. I love my father. I didn't want to hurt them ever. And I hurt them so deeply that day. And on the way home, I fought with my brother. He came back to my house and he 12-stepped me. But when I was fighting with him on the phone, I paused and he said, "Do you have a problem with alcoholism, I think?" And I said, "Of course I do." And that's the first part of the first step. I admitted it. I hadn't admitted it to anyone, but every day I got up and I didn't want to drink. Every day, every single day, I didn't want to drink. Not because of any noble reasons. They'd sailed. Everybody was gone. All the money was gone. All my dignity was gone. I didn't want to drink because I had terrible digestive problems from alcohol. I was sick all the time, but I'd wake up and say, "Don't drink today." And I would try not to drink. And I couldn't make it to noon. I never made it to noon. I was always drunk before the morning was out. So my brother said, "I think you have a problem with alcoholism." And I blurted out, "Of course I do." First half of step one. Then my brother took me down to the beach when he came back to my apartment to talk to me about recovery. And he did this magical thing. He didn't yell at me. He talked about his life. He talked about how he felt when my family kicked him out of our house when he was 18. I was 11. I remember that. He's telling me how he felt that day. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was going to yell at me for ruining Mother's Day, but he saw a man suffering from alcoholism and he came armed with certain facts about himself. Thank God, right? Thank God my brother didn't thump me on the chest and call me stupid. Like I've heard so many people say in AA. I just hate that. If your sponsor is thumping you on the chest and call you stupid, I would ask you to have your sponsor read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in which it says we never talk down to another alcoholic. Love and tolerance is our code. Patience, tolerance, love, welcomeness, affinity, like my brother did. My brother told me how he felt when he got kicked out of the house when he was 18. Then he asked me what my plan was, and I thought, man, he doesn't know that I got a pregnant girl across town that I don't love who's 18 years old and I'm 30 years old. And then sitting there shaking, trying to smoke a cigarette at 108 pounds with no alcohol in my body that day. My brother started telling me how he felt when his wife and son kicked him out of their house and he became homeless. And I remember that day I was 14 years old and my brother called me because he had no one left to call. And he told me how I felt that day. And then he asked me what my plan was. And I thought, God, he doesn't know I'm tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I'm wanted by the police. I can't get a job. I'm going to get evicted from my apartment. I've blown my reputation globally in music. He doesn't know any of that. And then he told me how he felt when he lived in his car. And I didn't realize it, but he was describing how I felt sitting on that lifeguard stand. And I started to soften up and I started to surrender just a little bit because all I wanted to be was who he was now. He was one of the worst drunks I ever met. And now he's this honest, bright-eyed guy showing up for my parents. My mother who's dying of cancer, showing up for my dad, helped paint his house. And I'm sitting there shaking. I couldn't get out the door to visit my mom for 7 months, although I called her all the time, telling her I'm coming over, and I never did. And then he asked me, what's your plan? And I realized he doesn't know that I pushed that pregnant girl down a flight of stairs 2 days ago, that I put a gun in my mouth last night. And then I worked the second half of the first step. I realized how unmanageable my life was. My life was so unmanageable. I knew that if I told my brother the truth about it, he wouldn't believe me. He knew a guy that went to college and graduated at the top of his class. He knew a guy that did what nobody else could do and became a professional musician. He knew a guy that always had the right thing going on, projects, relationships. I had a beautiful life, but I gave up my dignity, my self-respect, my character, and my innocence. It was all gone. I'm an animal sitting on a lifeguard stand. That's step one. Admitted I was powerless and realized how unmanageable my life was. So a series of events happened. My brother said he was going to come get me in a week and take me to rehab. During that week, I reconsidered my position on going to rehab. I was afraid. I didn't want to go. I wanted my medicine. I wanted to have my medicine. I couldn't live without it, and my life was nothing. I was a moonscape. But the day he was supposed to pick me up, somebody called before him, and it was the mother, somebody who knew my daughter, the mother of my daughter. I didn't know who it was for years, but she said my daughter was born. And I drove to the wrong hospital because that's the kind of stuff I did, and they weren't there. I drove to the hospital where I was born because alcoholics are selfish and self-centered, and I'm that selfish. I think babies only come from Little Company of Mary Hospital in Redondo Beach because that's where I came from. All of you UK people, your parents flew over here, birthed your babies in Torrance. But I walked out of there so despondent. I wanted to die. Can't find my baby. I don't want to go to rehab. I don't want my mother to die. I can't look myself in the mirror, and I decided to kill myself, which was not an act of depression. It was an act of cowardice and desperation. I want to be respectful to people that have depression. I didn't have that. I had cowardice. I didn't want to live with all these problems, and I was desperate not to go to rehab, not to have my mom die while I was cognizant, not to have this baby that I could not possibly parent. But I got in the car and I put my head in the steering wheel. I turned the key to the car and the name of the right hospital came into my head. And that's grace, Marilyn. That's the grace that keeps us sober. That's grace, Paul. That's the grace that might keep you from ever relapsing again. And I know it's grace because I meditate all the time now. I meditate every day. For 25 years I have. I'm 32 years sober. And when you meditate every day, you realize you're not in charge of the thoughts that come into your head. And I didn't try to think of the name of that hospital. It just popped into my head when my car backfired and saved my life. That's grace. You know how it's grace? Because it changes you. That's how you know it's a power greater than you. I can't change me. I've tried and tried. And I drove to the right hospital. I couldn't believe it. I drove right over there. I was 108 pounds. I've been wearing the same clothes for a week, breathing fire. I got flip-flops on. I shouldn't go to a hospital. And I went in there and I saw the mother of my daughter, and she looked terrible. She just had a baby, and she looked beautiful because she just had a baby. I had no love for her. I just felt afraid to be around her. She looked so present and real and kind and alive with love, and I couldn't be around that. I'm an animal. I can't be in places like hospitals. And then she kept me there for a minute because she handed me this perfect baby, Phoebe Rose. I'm looking at her 32 years ago. I'm looking at her. She's so gorgeous that I want to throw up because I'm in the bondage of self, and I'm not gorgeous. I'm filthy and disgusting and ugly. And when I'm in the bondage of self, I try to paint everything with my interior ugliness. And my paint's not sticking on these women. So I handed Phoebe back to Anna. I got in the car, went home, knew I was going to kill myself. I felt very content with that decision. Ran up the stairs, and my brother was standing on my porch with a duffel bag full of my stuff. Grace, grace, grace. We're never not in it. It's all around us. Paul, there is grace waiting to help you, man. You're on this meeting. That's your grace. Marilyn, 81 days of grace. Wow. Doing something you couldn't do of your own power. My brother standing there on my porch. I went to the wrong hospital. I went to the right hospital. I stayed for 2 minutes. I drove home, and coincidentally, my brother came to my house, went to my house, packed my stuff, walked out, and didn't let me go near that gun in my house. Put me in his car. So step two, what's step two? Well, 30 days later, I got out of rehab. I was happy. I gained 47 pounds. I slept, and people would have conversations and I could understand them. And then I would say words and they could understand me. I liked having 30 days. It was the most precious thing I ever had, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know it for a few minutes. I got home from rehab, 2 hours drive with my brother, and we pushed me out of his car. He said, "Hey, go to a meeting." And I lied and said, "Yeah, that's what I was going to do. But I'm not going to a meeting. I want to see my mother. To see my baby. I want to get a job." I just was in 30 days in a rehab, but I walked up into my apartment. There was a party going on in there. Somebody had broken in. A bunch of people I didn't know. I lived there by myself. My guitars were gone. They were playing music I didn't like. They were snorting cocaine in there, smoking pot, drinking. And I turned around and ran away because I had grace. Grace. I had a thought. I had an involuntary electrical response that I normally wouldn't have looking at my favorite Olympic events like that. My thought was, "Matthew, you got nothing. Look at your life. But you got 30 days. That's all I had. 30 days before, I wasn't a musician anymore. I wasn't a son anymore. I wasn't a brother or a friend or a worker. I was just an alcoholic. I'd been reduced to that. I'd been reduced to sitting on my couch, drinking against my will, letting everything disappear. 30 days later, I don't have that going on. And that's all I want is one more of that day. So I looked around at these beautiful girls snorting coke off my glass table, had the pot in the air and the beer in my hand. They handed me a beer in my own apartment. They didn't know I lived there. I put the beer down and I ran. Ran to a payphone. I called AA. Guy answered the phone. I just threw up on him, all my problems. He asked me where I was. I told him where I was. He said, "You're standing right across the street from a meeting." Grace is always there. It's never not there. Even in my despairing mind, even when I feel like I'm not enough or I'm not good enough, grace is standing right next to me going, "You're fine." Being in the bondage of self is self-pity. Being in the bondage of self is fear. Being in the bondage of self is blame. These 12 steps are the elegant exercises to relieve me from the bondage of self. That's their whole goal. So I don't have to drink. I got out of that meeting and I couldn't go home. Through a series of events that I didn't want to happen, I ended up at my parents' house. I did not want to go to my parents' house. Looking at my parents' door, in there's two people that love each other. For 45 years, they'd been married. My mom's dying. My dad's a war hero, and he's beside himself with fear of being alone without her. They're good people. I'm not going to show up on their door, ruin their night, ruin their day, ruin the rest of the month while I stay there. It's embarrassing for me. It's the worst possible scenario. And then I knocked on the door because the guy drove away. And I opened the door and they were glad to see me. Like really glad. Like it came out of them. Involuntarily, they just said, oh, he's here. And I had this perception of it being the worst thing. But when I'm looking through my perception, I'm looking through filth and fear and judgment, guilt, memory. I can't see perfect reality when I'm using that perception. My parents were married for 45 years. They love each other. And they've been lying awake every night praying that I wouldn't die. Last time they saw me, I weighed 108 pounds and I couldn't make sense. I have 2 degrees. So I moved in with them. I thought it was going to be awful. It was very uncomfortable. And if you're new here, Paul and Marilyn and maybe Craig and born again Benjamin, if you're new here, don't be fooled into thinking because something is uncomfortable that it isn't perfect. A lot of perfect things in AA in my 32 years of recovery have been uncomfortable. And one of them was taking care of my mother and my father during her last years. I had to dress her and undress her. I had to hold my dad when he cried at night, my mighty father, my World War II hero. He fought the Battle of the Bulge, holding him while he cried, his loser son fresh out of rehab. It was very uncomfortable, but it was perfect. I would love to do it again. I'd give anything to do that again. These are not tears of sadness. These are tears of reliving. I'm available for that now. I can do that now. I never wanted to look back. If I look back, it's just garbage and guilt. So what's step 2? I went to 3 meetings a day because being with my parents was a little crazy for me. I'm 30 days sober, coming out of my skin, no steps. And they made me uncomfortable. You know, they did weird stuff, like they were honest and kind and loving. You know, I hadn't been around that in a while. It freaked me out. You know? And then I come to you guys. I don't know any of you, and you're all hugging each other, drinking terrible coffee, and clapping when people say awful things. You made me crazy too. I was ping-ponging back and forth between uncomfortable places. And then one day, I caught my dad trying to make breakfast for my mom, and I started making breakfast for him. He doesn't know how to do that. My mom always did that. I helped him make breakfast, and he talked about loving my mother. My mighty father was talking about intimacy of a long marriage. And I saw him. I got enough relief from the bondage of self to see my beautiful father. And then I went to the meeting that I used to just go to because there was a girl at that meeting who talked about her sex life a lot. And I went to that meeting that day. And somebody said something, and I thought, God, I love it when that guy shares. And then I realized that guy was going to marry this girl, Karen. Bill was going to marry Karen. I looked across the room and thought, I love Karen too. And I got enough relief with the bondage of self that I could see perfect reality without my polluted perception. And I came to believe. Step 2. I didn't have it shoved down my throat. We agnostics tell you cry uncle. Yeah. Or, you know, all sorts of weird stuff comes at you from people in AA about spirituality. I'm one of the weirdos. I throw it too. But I just came to believe. I started liking being with my parents. I started liking being at the meetings. And the biggest thing ever is I didn't mind being with me. I didn't need any medicine. Step 3 was awkward. Step 3 was weird, man. I'm reading the book with this guy I hardly know, my sponsor. He said we're going to get down on our knees in his kitchen and hold hands and say this prayer. I am totally and completely against this. I don't know this guy. I don't want to make out on his kitchen floor. He's like got an apartment complex. Everything's locked. The door's locked. The gate's locked. The courtyard's locked. My car's 3 blocks away. I can't even run for it, man. And then he kneels down in his kitchen. And, you know, it's awkward when one guy's kneeling on the floor and one guy's not. So I thought, all right, I'll get down there with him, you know. So I get down there, and if you're holding hands and kneeling, there is no way to be distant from each other. We were nose to nose. It was really weird, man. And he said, say this prayer, God, I offer myself to thee. I said, God, I offer myself to thee. He said, to build with me and do with me as thy will. I said, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. He said, relieve me of the bondage of self. I just wanted that so much. And I didn't know I wanted it. I just couldn't take this anymore. I couldn't paint everyone with my ugliness at home and at the meetings because you were beautiful. My modus operandi were failing me. I still was critical in my brain everywhere I went. And then when I get alone at night to fall asleep, I was critical of myself. So when that sentence came out, relieve me of the bondage of self, I paid attention to that. But I'll tell you, man, when we got up off the floor, I didn't feel like I'd turned my will and my life over to the care of God. I don't even know what that would have felt like with 60 days sober or whatever I was. But this is what I felt like. And this is for you, Paul. I felt like I'd done something that I didn't understand that made me really uncomfortable because I didn't want to keep living the way I was living. And that's the whole journey through the 12 steps. If you read the literature carefully, you will see Bill's way he writes is, we're going to ask you to do this thing. You're really not going to want to do it. And now I'm going to spend a few paragraphs convincing you to do it. That's step 1 is like that. Then you get to step 3, it's like, all right, we know we got a lot of objections. It's all these salesmen, please trust us, do this, trust us, do this. And then I did these uncomfortable things. Step 4 and 5, I have no time to do this in this meeting. But I'll tell you what step 4 and 5 did for me, and it took me a while to even notice it. I had spent 30 years, I was 30 years old, building a beautiful billboard. Now it'd be an LED screen, but I got sober in the 90s. It was a beautiful billboard. It had sexy Matthew up there and intelligent Matthew and talented Matthew. And there's a good shot of Matthew at the beach. And I'm holding it up. This is who I want you to see. And it's exhausting. And then it would the wind would blow or the sun would fade it. And I'm putting blue tack. You guys have blue tack in the UK, right? We don't have that here. Throwing in a UK word and duct tape for the Americans. I'm putting this thing up there just to put on enough of a show so you think I was okay. But it's not who I am. And it's exhausting. And right behind me is a voice that never shuts up. You're a loser, Matthew. You're a pig. You're full of lust and anger. In fact, they give you the 7 deadly sins right in the 4th step and the 12 and 12. I looked at the 7 deadly sins and thought, those are tools for living. That's how I get by. What are you talking about? Lust and greed? That's Tuesday. But this voice behind me was telling me something that wasn't true. It wasn't who I am. And the billboard I've been trying to hold up in front of me wasn't who I am. And then I did a 4th and a 5th step, and my sponsor properly fed back to me things he'd done, properly showed me things that were blocking me from the sunlight of the spirit called character defects. And I became a human being. And man, it was really nice. It wasn't super heavy. It wasn't as exhausting as being the Matthew show on every channel 24/7. And the other thing that helped me become a human being was they made me the greeter. And then they trusted me to make coffee. And then I got a car that ran more often than not, and I could take people to meetings. And those 7 deadly sins, if we're getting into 6 and 7, I think that's where we're rounding the corner. The 7 deadly sins, they got really bastardized by the church. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I was told those are the 7 deadly sins. For these things you will burn in hell. And again, I got the 7 deadly sins introduced to me when I was going through puberty. So sloth, lust, what? I'm going to hell. That's like 7 days a week. Envy, I couldn't play a sport to save my life. Greed, anger. Seriously, man, I was a walking encyclopedia of 7 deadly sins. And then I did some research. I've read a book called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And in that book, there was a footnote. And I read the book in the footnote. And in the footnote, there's a book about a guy named Evagrius Ponticus. Evagrius Ponticus was a desert father. He was a very early Christian, early century Christian. And these guys were badasses, man. They meditated on everything. They lived very Spartan lives because all they wanted to do is feel the sunlight of the spirit, feel connected to a higher power, and they got it. And Evagrius Ponticus knew when he had it. He was like, man, I'm connected to God. I can feel God coming through me. And then some days he's like, where'd God go? I can't feel God anymore today. And then he thought, well, I'll meditate about that. So he meditated and thought, and he came up with a list of things that blocked the sunlight of the Spirit. And there were 7 of them. They weren't deadly sins. They were human distractions. I don't have to feel ashamed. I'm supposed to have sex. Apparently, God wants more of me. That's dangerous, a little crazy. But there's 4 of them now wandering around. Actually, 3 of them. I adopted one. Thankfully, she's not in my gene pool. She has a chance in life, right? And, I just wish I'd known that. And I learned that in AA, that these are things that block me from the sunlight of the Spirit. And 6 and 7 now, I have this wife. I married the absolute woman of my dreams. She's just dazzling to me. Still, we're married 29 years together, 30 years. I met her at a bus stop. It was love at first sight. We got engaged in 2 weeks. We've been married 30 years. And my wife, unfortunately, early on in our marriage, 7 years into our marriage, she had a massive stroke. She became paralyzed on her left side completely. She has pronounced brain damage that manifests in a loss of memory sometimes. And boy, you add 2 glasses of wine to that brain damage, and she's a party, man. I'll tell you, I just found that out the other day again. But she's, my love. And then we had COVID come, and we're stuck in this house together. And, I travel a lot, and I run big company teams, and I teach leadership, and I did back then in COVID. And now I'm with Matthew a lot, and I'm noticing some of my habits. And one of my habits is I might go downstairs to help Pip get breakfast, get her dressed and get her breakfast. And then, she might do something that I interpret as self-centered or rude or not thinking. And I don't say anything, but I walk upstairs and I have this guy who lives in one of the lobes of my brain. His name is Johnny Cochran. And he wakes up and he goes, hey, man, did you see that? Did you see that rude thing she did? I'm like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. And then I get to my desk and Johnny's like, after all you've done for her, seriously? And I'm like, Johnny, seriously, I got work to do. And he said, well, let's build a case. So in between doing my work, we're thinking of a pretty good case to go hit Pip with. She was rude. She was thoughtless. Some momentary lapse of loving me exactly perfectly. We cannot have that in this home. And, about lunchtime, I go down there to check on her. And without even raising my voice, I just eviscerate her. I lay out how rude she's been to me. I lay out how much she owes me. I lay out how different we are and how kind I am and how selfish she is. I don't even raise my voice. And my beautiful wife disappears into her eyes. She feels afraid and maybe a little guilty. Maybe I hit a nerve. And when I see that I've completely won the argument, I feel sick to my stomach. And that is the grace of God. Because in the past, if I saw a little bit of guilt, I'd pounce and go deeper. But I've been doing this program for a long time. And when I stand there and see my wife look defeated, look afraid, hide from me behind her eyes, I congratulate myself for beating the love of my life, who has brain damage, in an argument she didn't know we were going to have. And that's step 6. I walk up to my office and I'm entirely ready to never do that again. I can't believe I did that. And you know what happens? She doesn't talk to me for a while. She lets me help her, but she's closed down. She's a little bit afraid. She thought we were great. We were great when we woke up. But Johnny Cochran came out of his office and whispered in my ear, my character defect, pride. So what's step 7 look like? Well, we were in COVID lockdown for a long time. I'd hear Johnny waking up. I go, shut up, you're fired. And he kept talking. I'm working, and Johnny's like, no, seriously, man, this time that was big. She left the water on, she flooded the garden. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And I'm, shut up, Johnny. But I still get these little case files, and they're stacking up on my desk, and it's lunchtime. I got to go down there. So I started doing one of these tools. I prayed, God, help me to be a loving husband. Help me to give my wife room to be a human being so she feels safe and comfortable in her own house. And I slide those little files into the wastebasket. 99% of the time, I don't take them downstairs. And you know what I get? In step 7, my wife blossoms in front of me. The beautiful, nuanced perception she has, she shares them with me. She's unguarded. She's kind. She's laughing, unguarded. We go to bed. She lets me dress her for bed. And my wife and I fall asleep holding hands. We have for 30 years, except on days when Cochrane showed up. So I had been blocking myself from the sunlight of my wife's spirit through my character defects. I don't want to get rid of them so I'll be good. I want to get rid of them so I'll be full. I want to get rid of them so I can sleep like my grandson. Steps 8 and 9. You know, I love 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, right? 6 is became willing. 8 is became willing. That takes a little while. And I owed some people a lot. I owed the mother of my daughter a huge lifetime amends. I owed business people amends, musicians amends. I owed this guy $15,000. I told my sponsor, I can't pay that guy. I don't have $15,000. He goes, well, how much you got? I said, $20. So we sent him $20. He lived in another country for a while. And then a while back later, he said, did you send him any more money? And I hadn't. So I sent him 20 more bucks and I started keeping track. I owed him $15,000. I'm sending him 20 bucks and I'm writing it down like, I paid you $80, man. Took 4 months, but I paid you $80. And 7 years in, this guy calls me, Larry is his name. And he says, hey, stop sending me these checks, man. It's embarrassing. And I said, well, I looked at my ledger and I said, I've only paid you $7,000. I owe you $8,000. And he goes, I'm telling you, you don't. You have blossomed into the man I wanted you to be. You're a good father. You're a great husband. You're really good to your parents as they passed away. I watched it all. You paid me back 1,000 times. You become the man I wanted you to be. And this is a cautionary tale for Marilyn and Paul. I made the mistake of calling my sponsor. Do not do that. I called Bill and said, hey, man, I paid that guy back. And Bill, I don't know why he said it this way, but he said, oh, you paid him all the money? I don't know why he said it that way. And I said, well, not all the money. And then I told him the story. And he said, look, Matthew, whatever. You started paying that guy $20 a month when he lived in the back room at your mother's house, your father's house. You now have a life bigger than your dreams. If you want to stop doing what's working, that's cool. You hung up the phone. That was an $8,000 phone call. And my father passed away a few weeks after that when I was with him. And the day before, he'd written us some checks for $10,000 each so that we didn't have to pay inheritance tax. And I went down to my wife and I said, baby, I know this seems weird. And I know we really need this money. We have little kids. We have a mortgage. And I know we really need this money, but I'm going to send most of it to Larry. She didn't even blink. She didn't even look up. She goes, okay. And my wife's not in AA. So I came back into the kitchen. I go, I'm a little concerned that you're not worried about this. And she said, why would I be worried about it? And I said, I'm going to give him 8 of these $10,000. She said, okay. She said, look, Matthew, I've never lived the way we live. I've never lived the way we live. People sleeping in our camper, getting well in front of us. The kids being around all these people that are trying to change. You doing weird stuff like sending most of our money to some guy I don't even know. She said, it just works. I trust you. That's called step 12. And I didn't even know I was doing it. I didn't know my program was permeating my family. And I sent Larry that $8,000 the next day. I FedExed it overnight. And this is what happened. He called me and said, hey, your check came. I said, okay, are we good? Is that it? And he goes, I got to tell you a story. Because yesterday we found out my wife's going to have a baby, Wendy. I was in his wedding. I knew Wendy. And he said, and we've been renting this house down here in Santa Margarita. And I thought all night about how much I could put down as down payment. And I was almost exactly $8,000 short. So the loser, the criminal, the flake helped a guy buy a house with his own money. I love that part. I used to hate that part, but it wasn't my money. It was his money. I stole it. And then I held on to it long enough till he really needed it. I can't believe me. The whole Jimmy Stewart part of that story disappears when I have to tell you it was his money. So that's 8 and 9. I got 10,000 9-step stories. There's a reason the promises are in the 9th step that are so complete. It says you comprehend the word serenity. So I'm going to talk about 11 and 12 by talking about the serenity prayer. And then I'll be done. I think I'll be done on time. The serenity prayer, it offended me. I have a degree in religious studies. I know prayers from Islam and Buddhism and Christianity and Baha'i religion. I'm a religious elitist. I'm a bum who can't tell the truth and steals from everybody, but I'm a religious elitist. And then I come to AA and you go, we're going to pray the serenity prayer. And I just listen, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I got perception, and it turns out it doesn't just go this way. It comes this way. And when I heard that prayer for almost 3 years, I was pretty sure it meant, God, give me the patience to put up with all this BS. Not God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. I thought, I need some patience. There's a lot of BS going on around here. Keeps hitting me in the head. Marilyn said the fog's clearing. There's a guy at our meeting who said, you guys are right. The fog is clearing. But now the planes are landing. And when the planes were landing, there was a lot of BS to put up with. I couldn't do it. So I was glad we have this little rinky-dink stupid prayer. Help me, give me the patience to put up with this BS. But you know what it actually says? Grant me the serenity. Like perfect spiritual centeredness. The line in the promises after step 9 says, we will comprehend the word serenity. I didn't even know what it meant when I was 30 days sober and judging that prayer. But now I do. Grant me the serenity, the perfect spiritual centeredness to accept and welcome life as it is. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. 7 years later, she's paralyzed on her left side. She gained 70 pounds. She can hardly walk. She can't move well in bed. She can't do the things she used to do. But man, I accept her just like she is because she's perfect. We've been through a lot of uncomfortable things because her disability can take a toll on us. Takes a toll on our children's lives sometimes. Really takes a toll on her. But she's perfect. Reality is always perfect. She taught our children about people who can't get around as well. They're empathetic, kind, loving people. She taught me about intimacy. It's no accident that my wife's British. California girls, they want you to do stuff for them. My British wife does not like me taking care of her. She allows me to take care of her. And that's a lot different. She asked me once, she said, do you want someone else? And I said, no. She said, well, I can't do the things for you I used to do. And I said, well, I thought about all the girls I dated in college, baby, and I would have put a pillow over their heads by now. I was like, I love you. I don't know why. My eyes are green and you're my wife. So that's what serenity is, perfect spiritual centeredness, to accept this wonderful life. There's this unfolding reality that's perfect. And I'm always bound in when I'm in the bondage of self, I'm not serene. Please grant me serenity. The courage to change the things I can. Wow. I hated that part. I really skip over that mentally when we said it, because I grew up in Catholic school where nuns were telling me, you should be more compassionate. You should be more honest, Mr. Mitchell. If you're thinking about sex, you're going to hell. They said that to me, to all of us. And I tried and tried to be this ideal. What Bill would say is I was trying to overcome my own natural urges. And they weren't even out of whack yet. And I couldn't do it. So when you said the courage to change the things I can, I thought I don't have that kind of courage. But I misunderstood the word courage. I was thinking of the material word courage, like the movies, bravado, certainty, fearlessness, righteousness. But that's not the spiritual courage that there's talking about in that step. And it took me a long time doing these steps, working with others in the 12th step, meditating and praying, till I really realized it's so simple that it gets by me. The courage in that prayer and the courage referred to in AA is a little bit of willingness and a little bit of humility. Do I have a little bit of willingness to get down on my knees with that guy on the floor of his house? Do I have enough humility to say this stupid prayer? You know what? Willingness and humility equal courage. It takes a lot of courage to do a 4-step, but you don't need the kind of courage you see in movies. You need little shots every day that you're working on it. Okay, I'm going to take it to a coffee shop. I'm going to write some names down. All I need is a little willingness, a little humility to really look at this stuff. I wrote 4 names. That's courage for today. A little willingness and a little humility when my wife is at the end of a rope. I don't have to fix her. That's humility. I need to go sit with her. That's willingness because it's uncomfortable. And at the end of those 2 things fastened together in the spiritual world, that's courage. And it's always available. It's never not available. I've got it. And I had to learn it over doing 12-step with people over and over, taking people through the steps, going to jails and prisons, like it's been mentioned here, taking the uncomfortable phone call, listening to people that are really struggling and watching them come out the other end better, having people show up for me when my wife was disabled early on and taking care of me. That caused me a lot of humility. I wasn't used to that. So I'll just say one thing about meditation. I think I have a minute left. I didn't understand meditation for a while, but meditation isn't sitting in perfect stillness and receiving God's direction. At least not my experience. Meditation is trying to find a stillness, being distracted by my mind repeatedly, because that's what my mind will do, noticing that, and calmly and innocently coming back to the stillness. I do that 20 minutes a day, every day. And if you practice that, getting distracted by the monkey mind, the compulsive thinking, and go, wait, I'm just trying to be still. I'm going to cultivate on purpose stillness, and coming back to the stillness, however frequently, without frustration, something changes in me. I changed. I became able to absorb things. I became able to think before I talked to my teenagers. I became able to go to the mental hospital when my son checked him in under suicide watch and not drive up there with a guilt trip, because I'd been meditating for 10 years when that happened. I drove up there with presence awareness. He didn't want my advice. He didn't want me to bust him out. He wanted me to sit with him. And I knew that because I meditate every day. I practice coming to the stillness and ignoring the noise every day. It's not frustrating if you don't judge it. And I just sat with my boy. Then a couple days later, I put my arm around him. A couple days after that, he started crying. A couple days after that, he told me what was going on, and then I busted him out. Thank God for the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My journey is never ending through these steps. I have continually turned to them and tried to mine them for spiritual growth, because my life hasn't gotten less complicated. It's gotten more complicated. Or, to say it the way God wants me to say it, it's gotten more rich and plentiful. And because it's more rich and plentiful, my responsibilities have grown. And because God gave me the tools, I can accept that. I think I'm done. I'm tired and my nose is full of snot, and I think it's been 50 minutes. So thank you.
Matthew, thank you so much. Words fail me. I can't think of more